Lesson 5-02, Fundamental Trigonometric Identities, Part B. So this is just picking up off the last lesson, and it is just more simplifying. All right, so we can see this one says factor and simplify. So I notice this is a difference of squares. This would be sine squared x squared minus cosine squared x squared. So a difference of squares would be sine squared x minus cosine squared x times sine squared x plus cosine squared x. It's a minus b, a plus b. But we know that sine squared u plus cosine squared u is 1. So that means I've got sine squared x minus cosine squared x times 1. Because all of that is 1. If I then subtract the sine squared in the identity, I get cosine squared is 1 minus sine squared. So I could replace my cosine with that. So I'll have sine squared minus 1 minus sine squared. Well, I have sine squared, that would become plus sine squared, so that would be 2 sine squareds and a minus 1. And that's about as simple as we can make it. Let's try another one. Multiply and simplify. So, looks like we can just FOIL these. The 2 times 2 will make 4, and it'll be cosecant squared x. And that would be negative 4 cosecant x plus 4 cosecant x minus 4. Well, the minus 4 cosecant plus 4 cosecant cancel out. Looks like we could factor out 4. And then we think, oh, hey, we had this, since it's squared, a Pythagorean identity that said cotangent squared plus 1 equals cosecant squared. So that means I could replace the cosecant squared with cotangent squared plus 1. So with that stuff. The plus 1 minus 1 cancel out, and I have 4 times cotangent squared x, which is definitely simpler. Let's try another one. Simplify these. Looks like we're adding fractions. Well, to add fractions, we need a common denominator. So on the first one, I need to multiply by cosine. My common denominator would be 1 plus sine times cosine. So if I multiply the first one by cosine, and the second one by 1 plus sine, we'll have that. Let's go ahead and multiply things out. 1 plus sine squared would be 1 squared plus 2 times 1 times sine plus sine squared. If you don't believe me, go ahead and do 1 plus sine times 1 plus sine. Because 1 plus sine squared is 1 plus sine times 1 plus sine. So it's 1 times 1, sine, another sine, sine squared. Oh, but hey, we've got cosine squared plus sine squared. Cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. It's a Pythagorean identity. So I now have 1 plus 2 sine of x. So that would be, if I rearrange things, that would be 2 plus 2 sine of x. Hey, I could probably factor the top, factor out a 2. And then I could cancel the 1 plus sine, so it'll be 2 over cosine. Oh, but let's see. 1 over cosine is secant. So instead of 2 over cosine, we'd write it as 2 times secant. All right, rewrite it not as a fraction. Well, what could we do? Well, I know there's an identity relating secant and tangent, but it's Pythagorean. It's tangent squared plus 1 equals secant squared. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. So it'll be secant plus tangent. So on the top, I have 3 secant of x plus tangent of x. On the bottom, I'd have secant squared, secant times tangent, and a minus secant times tangent. Those cancel. And then minus tangent squared. Well, I know secant squared from that identity is tangent squared plus 1. So let's go ahead and substitute that. Instead of secant squared, I'm going to put tangent squared plus 1. Oh, notice the tangent squareds will cancel out, so I have 3 times secant plus tangent over 1. And since it's over 1, I don't have to write it. And look, it is not a fraction anymore. Lastly, we'll do something called trigonometric substitution. So you're given an expression, and you're given some substitution to do with x. So we're going to plug in the x. So square root of x, okay, x is secant squared minus 9. Okay, but I wrote the problem wrong again. This should be 3 times secant theta. So 3 times secant theta. Sorry. So that'll become 9 secant squared theta minus 9. Well, I could factor the 9. And then remember a trig substitution. So I remember that tangent squared plus 1 is secant squared. So where the secant squared is, I can put tangent squared plus 1. That became that. The 1's cancel, so I have 9 tangent squared. Square root of that, square root of 9 is 3. Square root of tangent squared is tangent. And that's it for today. Have a good day.